Understanding new concepts is often difficult for most, especially when those concepts challenge the very foundations of our indoctrinations. Research for yourself. Think for yourself. Explore these new concepts with an open mind, and soon you will find self-evident truth. We encourage you to visit tcotlc.com to explore this book, 1 × 1 = 2, from Terrence, DaShon, Howard. Many of these concepts we're exploring are best understood with the accompanying images Mr. Howard includes within his book. So without further ado, our scientist personality will now resume reading 1 × 1 = 2.
The keystone of the entire structure of the spiritual and physical universe is rhythmic balanced interchange between all opposites. Walter Russell, unbalanced equation with 1 × 1 = 1. First and foremost, let us ask the most obvious question: is 1 × 1 = 1 a finished equation? Yes or no? The answer is no. Why? Because it's not even on both sides. Yes, nature desires action but demands equilibrium. Therefore, in order for an equation to be considered finished or completed, both sides of the equation must be equally balanced. Yet, in the case of 1 × 1 = 1, we have an unfinished equation, because we have 2 1s on one side of the equation and 1 1 on the opposing side of the equation. Let's attempt to balance this equation. First, by making sense of it, come on, let's label the relative factors. 1 × 1 = 1. We will call the first value A, we will call the second value B. We will call the third value C. Remember the basic laws of common sense. If a times B equals C, then C must be some product of A and B. Yet in order for 1 × 1 to equal 1, the value of either A or B has to be missing from the final product of C. Okay, let us simply apply the associative and commutative law to the initial equation. 1 × 1 = what? Add A to itself as many times as is indicated by units in B. Since A has 1 unit and B also has 1 unit, then 1 × 1 doesn't equal 1, 1 × 1 and 1 + 1 both equals 2. And since they are both doubling their value, then it follows that they are different expressions of the same function. This is the point where the waves of arithmetic and the waves of true and natural multiplication converge. ABC 1 + 1 = 2, ABC 1 × 1 = 2. You see what happens when you follow the clear and expressed rules of the associative and commutative laws. The equation is balanced on both sides of the equals sign. Subsequently, each number or variable multiplied by 1 would add on to itself. Most of the other functions can remain the same. Some of the other ideas will find themselves unable to remain in a world of truly rational mathematics. Therefore, the only logical conclusion for 1 × 1 to ever equal or to have ever equaled 1 is because someone either forgot to follow the basic rules of multiplication or they deliberately misled an early civilization. Otherwise, there is no way to make mathematical sense of or solve for the impossible hypothesis of 1 × 1 = 1. This is a classic example of a mathematical fallacy. In mathematics, certain kinds of mistaken proof are often exhibited and sometimes collected as illustrations of a concept of mathematical fallacy. There is a distinction between a simple mistake and a mathematical fallacy in a proof. A mistake in a proof leads to an invalid proof just in the same way. But in the best known examples of mathematical fallacies, there is some concealment in the presentation of the proof. I hereby call, and pardon my French, BS on 1 × 1 = 1. On that note, I must immediately declare that 1 × 1 = 1 is a false statement, and likewise, based upon the current practices in the field of mathematics, 1 times any number would equals an unfinished equation because both sides of the equation could never be equal as long as 1 × 1 = 1. Based upon the cited examples, if 1 × 1 = 1, then a times B equals A or just B. Also, all of these impossible unrealities and flagrant inequalities must likewise be rewritten as truthful and reliable statements. A times A equals AB times B equals BC times C equals CE. After thoughtful reflection and literally thousands of hours of observation coupled with 5 decades of deep and contemplative work, along with diligent studying upon the subject, all my research has brought me to the inevitable conclusion that this false concept must have been the brainchild of a godlike figure of some sort. a figure whose very fingerprints left the identity element property for mankind to forever stumble himself upon. Someone with whom the people possibly credited for giving them their multiplication table and their geometry. A gift that for a time would set that civilization apart from the rest of the world. A multiplication table and system of calculating that would enable that civilization to rule the then known world from the time of the late Egyptian dynasty, until the Medes and the Persians brought a sudden end to their way of life. Whomever it was that gave that naive generation some 6,000 years ago, or possibly even longer, a multiplication table based on 1 times 1 equals 1 and a flat view of universal geometry, gave those poor misguided people a false axiom upon which to build our now crumbling world. A false dimension that would behave as a bumper for our infantile species, a tutor as it were. A false axiom that would allow for a measure of growth and productivity for a time, but would inevitably lead to catastrophic failure and its ultimate collapse at the arrival of the truth. Unfortunately, for the latter generations that would eventually come to inherit this once thriving Mediterranean metropolis, the truth would come too late. Now, for the last 6,000 or plus years, our ancestors enslaved our thinking with that dogma for generations upon generations, leading down to our great-grandparents, who in like manner indoctrinated their children, who also in turn would propagate these mathematical lies to the rest of the world. Because of their wrong approach to the rules of multiplication, their systems would eventually fail because they were all built upon a faltering foundation, suffering the damages from being based upon a principle of implied predictability of loss. You see, when 1 times 1 equals 1, it is implied that 50% of the potential will be lost at their initial contact of these numeric entities. You start off with 2 values on one side of the equation, and in the process of multiplying them, one of the values goes missing, and no one cares what happens to it. It is a false axiom that, unfortunately for mankind, has become the very cornerstone of our misunderstandings concerning math and the very nature of the universe. An untruth told to a naive people by someone they placed so much trust in that no one dared to question their authority. How is it possible that there is not one cited reference in recorded history where someone has questioned the validity of this clearly unbalanced equation? A blatant lie that has masqueraded itself as the first truth of mathematics, when it could very well be the biggest lie ever told in the history of humanity, with possibly the most harmful and longest-lasting potential consequences. A lie that continues to be propagated by those who worship this false concept and profit from the loss of others. Why did someone find it necessary to put a cap on that early Mesopotamian civilization's potential for advancement? I will not speculate. Perhaps it was the best thinking of the time. As to where our civilization could have advanced had we not been misled by this false statement, again, it is of no benefit to speculate. Nevertheless, we are in the here and now, and we must hit the reset button and do a full about-face concerning our approach to mathematics. In light of this exercise, I feel that it is necessary for us to throw out the false positives and erroneous results. 1 times 1 equaling 1 is an equation that predicts a negatively discharging universe without the ability to overcome the radiational expanse of magnetism, because 1 would have to have a negative discharge in order for it not to bond with the second one, and a universe made up of all discharging particles could never assemble into molecules and other more complete integrated systems that we experience every day. 1 would by necessity have to be a positive integer in order for the gravitational and centripetal effects of electricity to accumulate atoms of low potential together into systems of high potential and ultimately build this wondrous universe abundant in its dynamic energy. With 1 times 1 equaling 2, we have a balanced equation where the laws of universal equilibrium and the conservation of universal energy remain intact. Therefore, 1 times 1 equals 1 must be rewritten as 1 times 1 equals 2. Were it not for the temporary hiding place that 1 times 1 equaling 1 has found behind the imaginary walls of the identity property, an imaginary fortress for any number wanting to break free from the laws governing the physics of our universe. All they have to do is to claim sanctuary under the identity property, or should we say, the false identity property, whose towering walls have never been breached. Why? Because they don't exist. Not just the imagined walls, but the identity property itself. It only exists in the 2D binary world of imaginary numbers, a world which cannot exist by definition alone. A 2D universe lacks the necessary stability provided by the 3rd and 4th dimensions. a stabilizing property that is the birthright and natural consequence of the laws of action and reaction. A law that forces all things in creation to be hinged upon its very existence. A set of proven laws and a necessary consequence of nature that is in direct conflict with the very notion of 1 times 1 equaling 1, calling into question the very authority held by the identity property, a property of mathematics that is diametrically opposed to the three-dimensional world that we've experienced every single day of our lives. Nevertheless, let's explore the ruins of the identity property and see what relics await. Identity property. In mathematics, an identity element or neutral element is a special element, such as 0 in the set of all integers under addition, or 1 in the set of positive integers under multiplication, with a special set of powers that enables it the ability to defy the laws of physics on 2 of its primary founding assumptions. First of all, concerning the number 1 in the case of 1 times itself or any other number or variable, the end product is that same number or variable, and that any number multiplied by a 0 equals a 0. As a result of this arbitrary rule, we are left with 2 false statements, 2 unnatural scenarios that makes it necessary for the fundamental laws of physics concerning action and necessary reaction, and the laws concerning the conservation of energy, to be suspended in order for this identity rule to exist. 1 times 1 equaling 1 is paramount to an action times action without a reaction. In mathematics, an identity element or neutral element is a special type of element of a set with respect to a binary operation on that set, which leaves other elements unchanged when combined with them, like a ghost or a shadowy influence upon nothing at all, yet it alters the natural course of any number it supposedly encounters. Therefore, in the case of 1, it is left without a mate, an equal and oppositely balanced condition, because it remains unchanged when other ones are combined or attempt to simply multiply, a state of existence that is impossible in this universe of equilibrium. Because the rule of nature is to first divide accumulated matter by the process of radiation and expansion, which is the work of magnetism, and then to multiply that which has been divided through the process of centripetal gravitative contraction, which is the office of electricity. Secondly, on the identity of 0 in multiplication, any number multiplied by 0 will become a 0 product. First thing, in order to multiply something by something else, they must be dimensionally equal. Then how do you make something dimensionally equal to nothing? The laws of conservation of energy might as well pack up and move away, because how can a something multiplied by nothing cause the something to disappear? Remember, energy cannot be created or destroyed. Yet, in the case of multiplication, a process by which all things continue to exist and propagate their existence, 0 behaves as a black hole of the number system that gobbles down anything that comes near it. A concept that doesn't exist except in outdated science fiction novels. How in the world have these 2 false statements been positioned as the unquestionable God rules of mathematics for the last 6,000 years? How deeply has this lie been interwoven into the very DNA of our approach to mathematics? A false axiom presented by an individual whose thoughts and ideologies have crafted our misinterpretation of the universe, which makes that person possibly the most influential person throughout all of history. We will now allow nature and the testimony of universal phenomena to answer these questions as we put this concept of the identity element to the test, with 1 times 1 equaling 1, and the future of mathematics weighing in the balance.
As with most things in life, it is important to take new things in moderation. We hope you will take the time to actually understand the concept for yourself. Actual understanding. In these times, it is too often too easy that we find ourselves discrediting the claims of another only because we've heard otherwise from yet another. It is important to always question everything. But too often we find ourselves trusting the words from others, whether it be from their credentials, their wealth, their influence. Too often we let others do the thinking for us. Don't forget, tcotlc.com. Research for yourself. Think for yourself. Subscribe as we continue into the Mathematics 101 chapter of 1 times 1 equals 2 by Terrence DaShon Howard.